What is up, fellow daimyos or bounty hunters? Welcome back to a brand new Book of Boba Fett breakdown, recap, and review. This is for Chapter 4. And is it just me, or did it kind of feel like this was an interlude-y kind of episode? Not that there wasn't good stuff in it, especially I want to talk about that little score that appeared at the end and who could be coming into the show. But also, yeah, we got into Fennec Shand's somewhat origin with Boba Fett, and then obviously getting back to present day eventually in this episode towards the end. There's a little bit, well, it was kind of regurgitating the same message from the end of last episode. It's like, we need to prepare. It's like, we will be ready. And then the end of this episode, present day, we need to prepare. So I'm not really knocking on it. It just didn't feel like, other than, you know, a whole bunch of context bringing us into present day once again this episode, there wasn't too much development in the meantime, other than, I guess, the somewhat families of Mos Espa agreeing to be neutral. But anyway, this episode starts off, where else, guys? Where else? In the Bacta tank, of course. That's the way we have been going to these flashbacks each and every episode, even though in this episode it feels like they could be over since Boba is now apparently fully healed. But either way, this took us back to when he was scanning Jabba's palace, or should I say Bib Fortuna's palace at the time, on the back of the Bantha, yet he was obviously not quite ready to get his ship back. And also, I'm just kind of wondering, you know, there was a lot of troops that somewhat secured the palace for Bib Fortuna, and I made this point at the end of last episode, that other than the recent gang that Boba Fett picked up, you know, the modification somewhat gang last episode, and he's got a few Gamorreans, he really doesn't have that many people. So if those twins wanted to rush the palace and take it from him, it feels like they could have, because I'm assuming all of the forces that Bib had hired and all of those troops that popped up on Fennec Shand's somewhat recon device, they all left probably when Boba took over. I just find it a bit weird that he really, if you think about it, doesn't have that much security, other than a Rancor now as well. There is that as well, but as he said at the end of this episode, he really needs some muscle. Like, he should have got it like yesterday. This is where Fennec, after her encounter with Mando, put some flares up and Boba spotted those. He went along and saved her, well, not before obviously going to the modification people, because we saw quite a lot more of their very out there speeder bikes, the colors and stuff, and I'm glad to know that I wasn't really alone in thinking that it didn't feel like it fit, even though I did see on Twitter a lot of people saying we technically have seen designs like this in the Star Wars universe before, maybe in Coruscant, but it does just feel, just something about it does feel a little bit too otherworldly for Tatooine, at least. I don't know, because you could still argue, well, those people came from the other place to Tatooine, but there was something still off about it, I argue, that just doesn't really feel spot on. But regardless, I'm guessing that this is where the crew that he picked up on last episode came from. This is where they start to get a bit familiar with each other. He somewhat already knows of her through reputation, saying, "Your master assassin Fennec Shand." When it came to introducing himself, I like how we had her face being quite taken back when he says, "I'm Boba Fett." I always love the way he says Boba Fett. It's like, Boba Fett. Boba Fett. But she was somewhat in disbelief. She's like, no, Boba Fett is dead. And I guess, since, as we know, he was a very famous bounty hunter, many people probably heard of the lame-ass way that he got knocked into the Sarlacc pit, so just don't really believe that he would have survived that. But lo and behold, he did, otherwise we wouldn't have this show. They still talk about other things, like, you know, I was taken in by the Tuskens. He mentions that they were massacred by the Nikto speed bikers, and he wants Fennec to help him recover his fire spray ship, which is, I guess, true to the model, but I do wonder if now people are going to be talking about how he could have said, you know, I need you to help me recover my ship Slave 1 instead of my fire spray ship. I think, to be fair to Disney, even though they want to lead with the fire spray name now rather than Slave 1, you could argue that Boba would say, I need you to help recover my fire spray model, but I guess if Han was here, he would have just said, you know, my Millennium Falcon rather than the actual model of the Falcon, but I'll leave that down to you. I like how Boba acknowledges how his armor is really a big part of who he is, because he says, without my armor, I'm a bit less persuasive, and that just shows how iconic his Beskar armor is, which is another thing that we learned, that it is actually Beskar. I'm not actually knowledgeable if that was ever truly known about Boba Fett's armor before, because obviously Beskar, which I actually have right here, is kind of hard to come across. So I didn't know, considering Boba Fett actually isn't a Mandalorian or didn't pertain to any Mandalorian crew, so to speak, that really was that Beskar. But it seems that obviously through all the jobs he did throughout the years, he managed to probably smelt some stuff down and help maybe coat his father's armor in Beskar, or maybe Jango's armor itself was originally in its foundation, Beskar. This is where Fennec agrees to help out. I mean, she kind of feels like she has to because he did save her life, and this is where she deployed that cute little recon droid to go into Bib Fortuna's palace and really just kind of scout out every layer and level. I have to admit, it felt good seeing a Jabba's or Bib Fortuna's palace, if you will, in action with what their rule would be like, because obviously now with Boba being in there, it's a lot more emptier. We don't really see all the people, droids, Gamorrean guards go around. I mean, we even got quite a highlight reel of the chef droids, if you know what I mean. And considering that Boba said he also wants to find his armor, I guess he really was out of it when he came out of the Sarlacc pit. I thought maybe he would have some memory, because I know he was really messed up, and obviously the Jawas took his armor, but I thought he would have some obscure memory to actually coming out of the Sarlacc pit with the armor on, like when he burst through the sand, rather than now he's thinking that it's still within the Sarlacc pit. Because I thought, yeah, that he would remember, obviously, coming out of the Sarlacc pit, pushing his way out, and still remembering having it on. But I guess, at the end of the day, he was very battered, bruised, a little bit digested in some of that acid. So maybe he really does feel like he left it down there. In between the droid doing its recon, him and Fennec Shand talk about how he's tired of working for idiots who are just going to get him killed, and how the Tuskens took him in, made him a part of their tribe. And as a result, he was kind of ready to leave hunting behind. So now with this newfound purpose and longing for a tribe, if you will, he wants to start his own house. And not only that, it's not just through spending time with the Tuskens. It's, as he mentioned, he's kind of sick and tired of the lack of brains of people like Jabba and Bib Fortuna. They don't really capitalize upon certain things, how much money could be made, how many lives could avoid being, lost if they had somebody with brains on the throne, and to rule with not only respect, the way we've been seeing him try to assert his rule in present day, but also with just, a bit of brains, literally. And obviously with someone like Fennec Shand at his side, and I was thinking about Chrysantan as well, and maybe we get some more clues to that this episode, considering that he says, like, do you need some work or whatever. I was thinking last episode, and I said it in my last review, that I thought it was a shame that if they didn't capitalize upon having not only Boba there with Fennec Shand, but a Wookiee on his side as well, just kind of building up the ranks of his own house, if you will. But this is where we actually got into Bib Fortuna's palace. I have to admit, this was a bit of an easy joke, but I did appreciate how the chef droid with all the butcher knives did the General Grievous thing. It would have been a bit too... obviously way too on the nose if he was like, I don't know, General Boba. I mean, but yeah, it was obviously a nice Grievous reference there. And this whole scene was pretty funny. We had that little crazy rat catcher droid running around. And I don't know why Boba felt like the need to grab him and just say, do you know who I am, before he powered himself off, like as if you need to prove yourself through a freaking rat catcher. But that rat catcher droid was pretty cool. I would like a model of that in my background somewhere. And before you know it, they actually made it to Slave One. And I like how they focused on Boba's eyes in this moment, because you can clearly see that he's welling up with tears because of how much this ship means to him. If you take into account the back-to-tank flashbacks to Kamino, and where you saw this younger version of himself reaching out to, Jango Fett flying away in Slave One in the distance. So this ship obviously means the world to him, and especially getting it back. What I liked in this moment when Boba was taking the controls and firing up Slave One is that it gave some opportunity for Fennec Shand to just show some of her badass skills, and that she did. She was fighting off a lot of people. I argued that this could have gone very wrong very quickly, but obviously we kind of needed to get Slave One out of there, so they managed to shoot the gate thing just in time for the gate to release, to be reclaimed by Boba once more, free at last. I like how when Boba said he has a few scores to settle, I knew exactly what was going to happen, and I was waiting for this since last episode, because I was hoping when watching last episode that they may have shown the revenge part on behalf of the Tuskens, but it was being saved for Slave One to just unleash absolute hell on those Nikto speed bikers, and this was great. He just unleashed hellfire, and then he did some more with a missile, so it felt great. They absolutely decimated them. They got what was coming to them, and oh man, could you just imagine like looking behind you on a swoop bike and seeing Slave One there and just knowing you're doomed? That was a really sweet moment of this episode. Up next though, they go to reclaim Boba's armor from the Sarlacc pit, and at this point he doesn't know that obviously it is entirely somewhere else. The Jawas took it, and then it just follows along the storyline that we got in The Mandalorian. But this is where he goes right over the Sarlacc pit, zooms right up close to the monster itself, and it starts pulling in the Slave One's ship. And I was just thinking to myself, how strong is this Sarlacc, considering it's going up against spaceship level thrusters, like reversing? Like, that must be a really strong beast inside there. But thankfully, due to Fennec Shand releasing the sonic bomb, which, you know, we're kind of lucky it didn't land any other way and that it just went sideways, because otherwise you could argue it would have split the ship, because obviously the little sonic vibration went out sideways along the sand. But either way, it shut the hell up out of the Sarlacc pit, and this allowed Boba to go down, which gave a little bit more of an explanation as to why he needed to go into the Bacta tank, because Fennec was kind of getting concerned by saying, like, you're burning, you're literally burning, like, you give up, that it's clearly not down there, and that he needed a Bacta tank. So finally, it kind of gave a little bit more explanation as to why he's been spending so much time in it, episode to episode to episode. After this moment, Boba and Fennec Shand have another sit-down talk about how he basically said he would pledge his life to protect hers if she was to join him, and not only that, she does go and say that living with the Tuskens has made him soft, which I think speaks to quite a lot of the complaints of the audience, so it's going to be interesting to see if people agreed with that. And I do kind of like his response, in where he says, no, it's kind of made me strong. You can only get so far without a tribe. And you can look at that in a way that Boba's always been alone. He sees this somewhat redundancy in the life that he's chosen up until this point, working for Jabba, working for the Empire on behalf of Vader in episode 5 or whatever. Like, it's never really got him far, and if anything, these orders on the behalf of others that he's worked for as a bounty hunter is the idiocy of them. Like, people like him get killed, and now he wants to start his own house, kind of what we were talking about earlier. And hey, Fennec, be by my side. And she obviously is kind of thinking, I'll be here along for the ride, see where this goes. And that leads up to present day, where clearly she is with him still. They go into town to Garsa Thwip's cantina, and we get a bit of a cool moment with Chrysantan going absolutely nuts. He really doesn't like Trandoshans, considering what they were like on his homeworld of Kashyyyk, which goes a little bit more into his backstory. But I think he's just sitting there seething, looking at them, just thinking, you look at these bastards. And this really, I really like how they brought the reputations of a Wookiee to live action, even more so, because in that moment he grabs that Trandoshan, and we have Garsa Thwip trying to talk him down, again getting a bit more into the backstory of his character, of how much of a legend he was in the arenas, and he doesn't need to prove himself in this moment. But regardless, before he put the guy down, he didn't quite kill him, but he literally tore an arm out of the socket, as from what we've heard before of what Wookiees are capable of. But again, as soon as I saw Chrysantan again, I thought that there's no way that they're showing him again without him finding his way somehow back to Boba to maybe work for him. And lo and behold, when he was walking outside, Boba caught up with him and said, hey, looks like you could use a job. Now, I don't know if this means he will be staying on after the war, because Boba could have initially enlisted him for a job to help, you know, the war with the Pikes and see what happens there. But I do think it would be really cool seeing Boba Fett on the throne here, Fennec Shand there, and then someone like Chrysantan right next to him as well. You would be really feared, like, looking up at the new daimyo in the audience chamber, like some people have come in the previous episodes, looking at the three of them just there, like big ass Wookiee, Master Assassin Fennec Shand, and the legendary bounty hunter, former bounty hunter, Boba Fett. So yeah, I feel like they could be going that direction, and I hope they are, because it'd be awesome if we got a season 2, which I guess would obviously see Boba Fett assert his rule, which would have been accepted as of the end of season 1, I'm guessing, to see these three as a trio go round as a strong ruling force. But not necessarily out of fear, but out of respect, even though you could argue Chrysantan brings a little bit of fear to the table. This is where we got a meeting at the end between Boba trying to talk to the other families of Mos Espa, considering the Pikes are coming, like, and they're like, why should we listen to you at the end of the day? Like, really, like, what's to stop us from even just killing you? And I argue, like, this is kind of true. I keep bringing it up, but what forces does he really have? Other than the Gamorreans, Fennec Shand, and obviously the modified gang of youths that he brought in, they could probably completely ransack this place, but this is where he flexed the Rancor, and that scared the crap out of them. I'm glad that the Rancor is still being addressed, but I feel like we're gonna only get bigger and better moments from that Rancor in the next couple of episodes. Boba did try and appeal to them, saying, look, we can accrue wealth and riches again if you were only to basically listen to me, but they're still like, They also kind of get profit from the dealing of spice in their territory, so again, they're kind of like, why should we kind of listen to you? But more or less, to just skip to the end of this, it ended with them not agreeing to help, but Boba saying that if the Pikes come to you, will you agree to remain neutral? And that is something they all agreed that they will do, and that if they get approached, they won't be like, I'm helping you, Pikes, and I'm not helping Boba. Like, no matter what, we're kind of staying out of it. And initially I was thinking, but like, what guarantees that? But I'm glad that this episode, they took the thoughts into consideration already, that if we have these questions, Boba did say to Fennec Shand at the end, well, they kind of know that if they were to just basically let them take full reign, that the Pikes would just basically try and control the whole planet or whatever. But anyway, guys, this is where we got to the very, very, very ending little tease of the Mando score coming in, because Fennec was like, you know, we kind of need more muscle. Boba was like, well, I got plenty of credits, and she was like, well, I know what credits by. And then the Mando theme played. So this could be our opportunity to see the Mandalorian, Din Djarin, and his journey continue after Baby Yoda, when Baby Yoda left. Like, this could be the moment we actually see what happened to him after those events. And it's interesting because we still don't truly know where the story is going in Mando next. Like, it's really hard to imagine that show just in a common sense kind of way. For them to not include Baby Yoda, they know it will be quite a hard thing for fans to digest, even though you could argue there is more to the show than just Baby Yoda. But if we look at the facts, that will make the show suffer if he's not in it, so you have to think that Baby Yoda will be back in the Mando in some way, shape, or form, the Mando show with Luke or whatever. I don't know how they're going to do that. I really don't know. But in the meantime, what they can show in some of this time in between is, since Din Djarin is a Mandalorian without having to have the care of the child, that means he's open to work, I guess. And maybe Boba Fett will call upon his help. And, you know, hey, if you've got another guy with literal plot armor on to come into the show with just Beskar everywhere, then I think he will be handy. Because probably, if we're being real here, Din Djarin's Mandalorian could just walk in and just keep shooting and kept getting shot at, and he'd be like ping, 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 and bounce off. So it would be really awesome to see Pedro Pascal pop up, which I think it's kind of obvious they are going to do in the last couple of episodes. But other than that, guys, this episode, it was decent. I felt like it was kind of quite slow paced, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just didn't feel like a whole bunch went on. I was interested to see where Fennec Shand came into it. We all know that Boba obviously helped her out, so I guess it was understandable that we would get that told through the Back to Tank flashbacks, but it does kind of feel like it is slowly trudging along to these last couple of episodes, which kind of makes me feel like, other than him finally having control, is that really where the series is just going to end? And that could leave the potential for a season 2, in where, as I said earlier, we get to see what it's like with Boba Fett ruling, truly. Even though kind of this show picked up with that, we didn't have, or he didn't have the respect, if you know what I mean. But now a season 2 could be like, well, where could he go from there? If there is no season 2, I do think it's a shame to kind of end the show with him only just finally getting in the seat, even though he was already in the seat since episode 1, if you're still with me there. Because if this season ends on that, it's like we don't truly get to see what it's like with him having all of Mos Espa accept his rule. So I would love to know what you think. Do you think these last couple of episodes, considering that we have had few and far between big pieces, do you think that they're just saving all the massive, massive moments for the last couple of episodes of the season? And just let me know your general thoughts and theories from this episode and what could happen after this. But if you enjoyed this video, guys, I would really appreciate a like. Maybe consider subscribing if you are brand new here for more breakdowns on the channel. But other than that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow daimyos and bounty hunters in the next video. Goodbye.